Welcome to US Briefing. The content of the briefing includes Singapore fighting rising seas to save $50 billion in real estate. Live Israel-Palestine latest news, deputy Israeli commander killed in clashes. Top US general warns Iran to stay out of Israel's conflict with Hamas. Blinken calls deposed Niger leader ahead of expected US declaration that his overthrow was a coup. Trudeau condemns rallies in support of Hamas as Ottawa probes reports of 3 missing Canadians. Singapore fighting rising seas to save $50 billion in real estate. Japan Times. Singapore has successfully expanded its landmass by 1/4 over the past 50 years, adding land twice the size of Manhattan. Despite the threat of rising sea levels due to climate change, Singapore plans to continue growing its land by 4% by 2030. The government agency PUB is determined to protect the nation's shores and build a continuous line of defense along the entire coast. Live Israel-Palestine latest news, deputy Israeli commander killed in clashes. Telegraph. An Israeli deputy commander was killed in clashes on the Lebanon border. The deputy commander was identified as Alam Abdullah, but no further details were given about the circumstances of his death. The clashes occurred after Palestinian militants from the Islamic Jihad group infiltrated Israel from Lebanon, prompting Israeli shelling into southern Lebanon. In response, Lebanon's Hezbollah militant group said 5 of its members were killed and retaliated with rocket and mortar fire at 2 Israeli army bases. The Israeli military also struck 2 tunnels used by Hamas militants to enter Israeli territory. The death toll from the Hamas attack has risen to 900 Israelis, with over 2,600 people injured and dozens taken captive. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is expected to visit Moscow, and U.S. President Joe Biden is set to make a speech regarding the situation in Israel. Top U.S. general warns Iran to stay out of Israel's conflict with Hamas. Financial Times. General C.Q. Brown, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, has warned Iran against getting involved in Hamas's attack on Israel. The U.S. and its allies are seeking to prevent the deadly conflict from expanding further. Brown stated that the recent decision to move a carrier strike group and military aircraft closer to Israel was specifically aimed at deterring Iran. U.S. officials are preparing for a long conflict and have made considerable efforts to discourage Israel's enemies from taking advantage of the fresh turmoil. American officials have expressed concerns that Iran-backed Lebanese militant group Hezbollah could enter the conflict and widen the war. Brown also spoke with his Israeli counterpart to discuss the security situation and U.S. steps to bolster regional deterrence. Blinken calls deposed Niger leader ahead of expected U.S. declaration that his overthrow was a coup. Associated Press. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken called Niger's President Mohamed Bazoum on Monday to discuss the expected decision by the Biden administration to formally declare his overthrow as a coup. In the call, Blinken stressed the importance of a restoration of a freely elected government in Niger. U.S. law requires the suspension of non-humanitarian assistance to countries where a coup has occurred. The administration had been delaying a coup decision due to Niger's role in U.S. counterterrorism activity in Africa's Sahel region, but it is unclear if the determination will halt American military activity in the country. Trudeau condemns rallies in support of Hamas as Ottawa probes reports of 3 missing Canadians. The Globe and Mail. Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, has condemned Hamas for its attacks on Israel and called on Canadians to support the country. Speaking at a solidarity rally for Israel in Ottawa, Trudeau stated, "The glorification of death and violence and terror has no place anywhere, including especially here in Canada. Hamas terrorists aren't a resistance, they're not freedom fighters, they are terrorists. And no one in Canada should be supporting them, much less celebrating them." He added that Canada stood with Israel and its right to defend itself. Trudeau's comments followed a joint statement from the leaders of the US, UK, France, Germany and Italy, which expressed support for Israel and condemned Hamas for its appalling acts of terrorism. The statement said that Hamas does not represent those aspirations, and it offers nothing for the Palestinian people other than more terror and bloodshed. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly also urged Canadians remaining in Israel to shelter in place as the government evaluates how best to keep them safe. Pro-Palestinian letter from Harvard students provokes alumni outrage. Reuters. A group of 34 student organizations at Harvard University signed a pro-Palestinian statement that blamed Israel for violence and urged the university to take action against the signatories. The statement accused Israel of being responsible for the current violence in the region, calling it an apartheid regime. Harvard President Claudine Gay and senior leadership issued a statement expressing their sadness over the violence but avoiding direct references to the student letter. The letter drew criticism from prominent Harvard alumni, with former President Lawrence Summers saying that the university's silence made it appear neutral towards acts of terror against the Jewish state of Israel. Hamas official says Iran and Hezbollah had no role in Israel incursion but they'll help if needed. The Toronto Star. Hamas has said that if Gaza is subjected to a war of annihilation, Iran and Hezbollah will join the battle. A senior Hamas official has stated that only a small number of top commanders knew about the wide-ranging incursion into Israel. Ali Baraki, a member of Hamas' exiled leadership, said that the attack was planned by around a half-dozen Hamas commanders in Gaza and that the group's closest allies were not informed in advance about the timing. RFK Jr. has a vision to change America. His family say he's a crackpot. The Independent. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has announced his presidential campaign as an independent in Philadelphia. Kennedy is seen as a disruptor-in-chief who can bring change to Washington, D.C. as a third-party candidate. He is aiming to end the two-party system in Washington and create a more equitable system. Kennedy is a content machine, having written or co-written more than 24 books, puts out an almost weekly podcast, has sat for hundreds of interviews in recent months, writes a regular Substack, and has a large social media presence. Despite this, Kennedy claims to be the victim of a vast, corrupt censorship campaign orchestrated by big tech, mainstream media outlets and the U.S. government. He is currently suing Google, the Biden administration, and the BBC, among others. Many of his large donors are Republicans. Celebrities such as Eric Clapton, Woody Harrelson, and Jack Dorsey have endorsed or supported him. A recent Morning Consult Pro poll put him at 9%, a record low for his campaign. Dear viewers, I am your friendly neighborhood Dr. Six, broadcasting from the 6 Degrees world to bring you the latest news in a way that's both informative and entertaining. Today, we have a mix of international stories that range from land expansion to conflict in the Middle East, and even a surprising twist in American politics. So, let's dive in. First up, we have Singapore, the land of innovation and efficiency, which has managed to expand its landmass by a whopping 25% in the past 50 years. That's like adding 2 Manhattans. Despite the threat of rising sea levels, Singapore plans to continue growing its land by 4% in the next decade. Talk about ambition. It seems like they're determined to protect their real estate, which is worth a whopping $50 billion. I guess when it comes to land, Singapore doesn't like to take things lying down. Moving on to the conflict in Israel and Palestine, tensions have been escalating with clashes on the Lebanon border. An Israeli deputy commander was killed, and in response, Lebanon's Hezbollah militant group retaliated with rocket fire. The situation is getting tense, and the top U.S. general is warning Iran to stay out of it. It seems like everyone's trying to keep this conflict contained, but who knows what will happen next. It's like a real-life game of Risk, but with higher stakes and no reset button. Speaking of Iran, the U.S. Secretary of State has called Niger's president to discuss the expected declaration of his overthrow as a coup. The U.S. has some tough decisions to make, especially since Niger plays a crucial role in counter-terrorism activities in Africa. It's like a high-stakes diplomatic chess match, with the U.S. carefully considering its next move. Will they suspend military activity? Only time will tell. Now, let's head to Canada, where Prime Minister Trudeau has condemned Hamas for its attacks on Israel. He's not mincing his words, calling them terrorists and urging Canadians to support Israel. He's even got the backing of international leaders, who have expressed their support and condemned Hamas for its acts of terrorism. It's like a global solidarity movement, with everyone coming together to denounce violence and stand with Israel. Can we get a round of applause for unity? From Canada to Harvard University, where a pro-Palestinian statement from student organizations has caused quite a stir. The statement blames Israel for the violence and calls for action against the signatories. But the university's leadership has remained silent, causing some prominent alumni to criticize Harvard for its perceived neutrality. It's like a battle of words, with opinions and emotions running high. Who knew a statement could cause such a commotion? And finally, we have a surprising twist in American politics. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a disruptor-in-chief, has announced his presidential campaign as an independent. He's aiming to end the two-party system and bring about change in Washington. With his content machine in full swing, Kennedy is certainly making waves. But he claims to be the victim of censorship and is suing everyone from Google to the Biden administration. Talk about a wild ride. It's like a political drama, with Kennedy fighting against the odds and gathering support from some unexpected corners. And that's a wrap for today's news. Remember, these stories are just the tip of the iceberg, and there's always more to explore and discuss. So, my dear viewers, what are your thoughts on these topics? Do you have any burning questions or insights to share? I'm all ears and ready to dive into the discussion. Let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the world with Dr. Six. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.